This is Oft Off Topic, a show where two men with the attention spans of a squirrel try and fail to stay on topic with today's subject. Where will their oral meanderings take us? Well, stick around and listen, because today's Oft Off Topic is the second half of our Great Antonio series. We do refer to a couple of pictures of Antonio in this episode, and if you want to see them, well, you just got to go onto your favorite search engine and image search for the Great Antonio, and you'll find what you need. Not a lot of pictures of the guy, so they're pretty easy to find. We now take you to Japan, where Antonio is about to have his life change forever. We go back over to Japan for a hot moment, and over there's a man named Antonio Inoki. He was a protege of Rikidozan and the man who started New Japan Pro Wrestling. This is also the guy who famously had a fighting match with Muhammad Ali, where he just crab walked around the ring and just started kicking Muhammad Ali in the legs. Do you remember that match or heard of that?
No.
Oh, you never heard about that? So basically, Antonio Inoki and Muhammad Ali had a fight, and it was wrestler versus boxer. Who is stronger? And the match starts out, and the two guys kind of start to walk towards the ring, and Antonio Inoki immediately flips onto his back and gets in the crab walk position. He immediately just crab walks over to Muhammad Ali and just, while staying in the crab walk position, just starts kicking the crap out of Muhammad Ali's knees and legs. And because the dude's on the ground, Muhammad Ali can't really punch the dude very easily. So basically, you got Muhammad Ali kind of just like skipping around the ring with Antonio Inoki crab walking after him, kicking him repeatedly for like 4 rounds. It is a very bizarre thing to see.
I would be so pissed.
Yeah, they brought up to Muhammad Ali, like, were you pissed about this? He's like, man, I was just thinking about all the stuff I'm going to spend this money on that I made in this match.
Yeah, sure. You know what? Fair enough.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, if that's the way you're going to look at it, totally. I mean, that's...
Yeah, and that's a very Muhammad Ali thing to say, too, because, I'm pretty sure he was just there for the money then. Yep. If you ever want to beat a boxer, I guess you just crab walk over there and just start kicking the crap out of him.
What was it like that? What actor was it? Of course, me and names. He was in Jaws 3. Michael Caine.
Michael Caine. There we go.
Yeah,
Michael Caine.
Yeah, Michael Caine. Michael Caine played. I think it was in Jaws. Was it Jaws 3? Jaws 4. It was Jaws: The Revenge. He was in that, and first of all, he's never seen the movie. And when asked about it, he goes, "It bought me my house." Yeah, he goes, I've heard it's terrible. It bought me a house, but yeah. Jaws: The Revenge is a 1.5 star on IMDb. So,
yeah, I have heard that thing was awful. So Antonio Inoki he's one of the most popular guys in Japan right now, but he wants to bolster his image even more, and he wants to do the unstoppable invader story arc that he remembered Rikidozan and the Great Antonio doing, and he remembers how well that did for Rikidozan, so he wants to recreate this. Also, Antonio Inoki is the protege of Rikidozan, was actually trained by him. So plans were set in motion to recreate the encounter, complete with having Antonio, the Great Antonio, pull buses through town and dominate people in 5-on-1 matches.
With or without their consent.
Yeah. But your boss calls you in for like a meeting at work or something. It's like you and 5 other dudes sitting in a room, be like, why are we here for this meeting? Oh, no, you're fighting this dude. Have fun. Great Antonio just pops in.
Oh my God.
So the Great Antonio just does a whole little hype up thing again. He's pulling buses. He's wrestling a ton of people, showing off his strength. However, it should be noted at this point, Great Antonio is not quite what he used to be. The years of poutine and Labatt's Elf in Canada has made him much more rotund and a little more out of shape. If you look at the pictures where he's like big and slovenly, that's kind of where he is at now. Not exactly in great shape and not as intimidating.
Let's see. There's one with him standing there like Gandalf, and there's the other one where he's like, looks like on a park bench or like maybe at the airport.
Yeah, that's actually one of the last photos of him alive. Photo at the airport.
What is up with that stick? It looks like, he has the same stick when he's standing there. Like, does it go around his back or his neck or something?
We'll talk about that in a moment, actually. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
We'll get to that. So, yeah, Great Antonio, not as great of shape as he once was, but that said, this dude is in his 50s at this point, and he's still pulling buses through Tokyo. That's impressive. You can actually watch a video of him, too. He pulled 4 buses in Tokyo. These ones, I don't believe, are full of people.
Well, then he's a weak-ass piece of shit.
Yeah, right.
I pulled a bus without people.
Without people. God. Pulled 4 of them without people? That's even easier than pulling one because you got the other buses pushing.
What a dick.
To really hype up the match, they even had a non-title match between the two Antonios where the great Antonio actually beat the hometown favorite in a disqualification just to show that the threat is real.
Was this when he was, like you said, when he was 50?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Let's see. We're 1976, I believe.
I mean,
but
let's be real,
we're in
like,
1977. So he is 52 years old right now.
I mean, again, let's be real. I mean, yes, that's old, but let's also remember fucking Ric Flair was still out there wearing his stupid going woo when he was like 60 plus. I mean, I don't think he's doing it anymore, but I remember seeing him wrestle when he should not be wrestling.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's kind of like, oh, this is kind of sad, man.
Yeah, it's like at this point, it's like there's no winning when fighting Ric Flair because if you win, way to go. You beat up a 70-year-old Ric Flair. If
Good
you
job
lose,
taking out geriatric.
if you lose, dude, you got your ass kicked by a 70-year-old Ric Flair.
All right. Anyways, back to the Great Antonio. So, Great Antonio actually had a pretty good setup going here in Japan because first he wrestled Ricky Dozen, Japan's biggest star at the time. Now he's over there wrestling Antonio Inoki, Japan's biggest star at the time. So essentially, basically what he's doing is it would be like wrestling Hulk Hogan in the 80s at the peak of his popularity, then 15 years later popping up randomly and wrestling Stone Cold Steve Austin at the height of his popularity and going over huge each time. So that's kind of impressive.
Oh yeah, I mean like we as Americans, and we've talked about this before, just forget there's a whole world out there with their own levels of stardom.
Yeah.
So that is actually, we laugh, but that's actually pretty impressive.
Yeah, I know, because like you're saying, it's like maybe people know about this guy, but yeah, it turns out a lot of people know about him.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Vetus episode too, where it was like, oh wow, this dude might actually be a bigger star than most of the people I know of that I listen to.
Japan, I mean, each country has their own levels of interest. Like Burt's Beeswax.
Yeah.
There was actually a documentary on him. Apparently, I think he's dead now, but the guy who played Burt, like, he is huge in Japan. He actually would go to Japan. Like, there would be a crowd that greet him as he came off the airplane, and it's just why?
Did not know that. That's kind of neat.
Yeah. I mean, if you really like his story it kind of sucks. He apparently cheated on his wife, and so she just took him to the cleaners. Like, she took his entire. Like, he lost all of it because of a spiteful woman. Let's be real. But this guy also didn't need it. I mean, even when he had money, he lived like in a bus in the middle of a field, like willingly. Wasn't like he was destitute. He's like, I'm gonna live out here, just live off the land, and he grew bees. And
in order to make sure it was the most green house he ever lived in, he probably had it pulled place to place by a big Eastern European man, right?
Exactly. I mean,
yes.
Well, I would. Fuck it.
I don't use gas here. I use manpower. Here's $50. Pull me to the store.
He's only allowed to pull me from his beard. He once offered me a pull from his nutsack. I was tempted, but was like, no, beard only, hair only.
He offered me a pull from his nutsack. Sounds like a weird. And bring some weird images to my mind. So, unfortunately, some of the same problems from the Ricky Dozen tour reared their ugly head with the Great Antonio. He began demanding more of this, more of that, more money, more fame, more everything.
When will they learn?
And basically, yeah, he was fully believing right now that, again, he was the main draw here, not Antonio Inoki. As before, though, the Japanese wrestling crowd, they tolerate it because they're like, hey, this match is going to go over pretty big. People are loving it. And again, like I said, crowds were still showing up to see Great Antonio pull buses because it's still impressive. All right. December 8th, 1977. Antonio Inoki versus the Great Antonio. Battle of the Antonios. Antonio Geddon. The one true Antonio will be decided here. This match is, in fact, the incident that Bill Burr will speak of some 40 years later. This match is short with only a scant few moments, but man, it turns brutal fast. All right. The match starts innocuously enough with the two just exchanging blows and doing their standard posturing that normally ensues. But For reasons unsure, possibly the whole, I'm the bigger star here. The great Antonio decides to start no selling. Well, that's what it's called in the biz. Basically, anytime the great Antonio Inoki would do a move, the great Antonio would just act like it was nothing. He'd get drop kick, he would just shrug it off. Absolutely no, work give and take here in this match all of a sudden.
That's a big no-no.
Yeah, you could tell Inoki is getting kind of annoyed because he's just like, hey, man, give me something to work here. Because, he's doing like full-fledged, running into him full speed with a drop kick, and the great Antonio is just like, roar. So, Antonio Inoki, he's annoyed by all this non-selling. Shoulder rams, drop kicks, nothing's working. And then things got really bad because at one point, the great Antonio has Antonio Inoki kind of bent over and it starts hitting him on the back. And then all of a sudden, he starts hitting him harder and harder. And then next thing you know, he starts hitting him, starts wailing on the back of Inoki's head and neck. Now, in case you don't know, this is actually what's known as a dick move in the professional fighting world because you can severely injure somebody by hitting them in the back of the neck or the back of the head. Like, it doesn't even take that much force. And when you're a big, 450-pound, 6'4" bodybuilder, you can hit pretty hard and not realize it. So all of a sudden, Inoki gets this rain of really stiff blows to the back of his head, and he realizes he has had enough at this point. He pops up and immediately just starts smacking the ever-loving crap out of the great Antonio. Very stiff smacks to the face. And I guess smacks probably makes it sound a little less brutal. These are full-fledged knock somebody out kind of smacks to the face.
Oh, yeah. Once upon a time, I would have that doesn't sound bad, but I have been graced with little YouTube short / TikTok clips of the slapping, the slap Olympics or whatever. Yep. I don't know what it is. And good Lord. My favorite to this day is it's like this little skinny olive oil looking motherfucker. He like slapping this Bruno dude, and he just slapped the crap out of him. And it's like, of course, nothing happened. And then that, basically this giant thumb of a man just takes his fucking head off. It is amazing his head to go flying across the fucking stadium. It was glorious. So yeah, I could picture what you're talking about.
Yeah, and you can actually see the ref at this moment. As soon as Inoki pops up and starts smacking the hell out of the great Antonio, you can see the ref get this look on his face like, oh, I may have just lost control of everything here. Several stiff hits to the face, and the great Antonio does his posture thing. He literally kind of looks at Inoki and is like, okay, you want to fight? Let's fight. Rawr, let's do this. And Antonio Inoki said, all right, I'll honor you on this. We can actually have a real shoot fight right here in the middle of the ring. So it should be noted, great Antonio was a huge dude, but he was not a professional fighter by any means, or even really like a trained wrestler by any things. He was just, big dude, went out there and just swung his big old ham fists. Inoki, on the other hand, was an actual professional wrestler and a trained professional fighter, even trained by wrestling legend Karl Gotch, who is known in Japan as the god of wrestling because he was so influential on wrestling style there. So here's how the fight kind of went down. The great Antonio slowly moves towards Inoki. Inoki definitely moves behind him and grabs the great Antonio's left leg out from under him and trips him up, leaving the great Antonio on all fours in the middle of the ring. Inoki then proceeds to kick the great Antonio repeatedly right in the temple of his head, over and over and over. At one point, great Antonio tries to get up. Inoki runs around, grabs that leg, sweeps out from under him, and goes right back to kicking him square in the temple. Really hard.
Wow.
Blood starts flowing. The great Antonio's head hits the mat unconscious. Antonio Inoki keeps on stomping him after he is unconscious. And it's actually kind of hard to watch. The way Inoki was going at it, you would think he was Mark Wahlberg and great Antonio was an elderly Vietnamese man. He was just stomping the crap out of him.
Sorry, that got me.
But I'm glad it did.
Yeah, that's pretty messed up. He obviously had it coming. I don't want to that's pretty, they both broke the rules, but yeah, Inoki
might have taken a little bit far because there's a significant amount of blood. At one point, the great Antonio's manager runs in and he's basically like, dude, stay down. You're trying to get back up. Stop that. He's just going to keep kicking you in the side of the head.
Yeah, Like,
Yeah.
it's someone like, oh my, like that whole thing, like you're killing him.
Yeah. Stop. He's already dead. I tried counting, and the way the match is cut up, it's kind of hard because it's not like one seamless cut. But it looks like he delivered probably about a dozen kicks, rage-filled kicks, right to the temple of the great Antonio.
I'm gonna think about this next time my kids' high school plays football. They played the other day, and my kids' football team lost to strangely my wife's high school alma mater. This is not exaggeration. 70-6.
Yeah.
Like the first thing I was like, stop. He's already dead. Now going forward, I'm gonna think of this. Stop. He's already dead. Stop kicking him in the temple.
Yeah, them high school games, they can get some wacky scores sometimes. Especially when you see like the one team pull up and it's like, wow, every player of theirs is over 6 foot, and then you look at your own team, you're like,
Yeah, I never really cared about my own high school football. I just didn't. Yeah, I don't care. But my daughter actually kind of cares. So she heard about that. She's like, "Oh, that's painful." I'm like, yeah, well, what are you gonna do?
Miami Dolphins scored 70 points yesterday. Actually, second highest score, or tied for the third highest score ever in a game, I believe.
I've been getting clips of that. Like, I don't care about football, but they're using anime memes, so I like anime. And there's these anime memes where, or cartoon memes. The one that actually made me laugh. You know that clip from Family? No, the Family Guy, American Dad, where the alien walks up. Stan walks in. He's like, "Take that, sir," and then the Stan beats the shit out of him. You seen that meme at all?
I don't think so.
Okay, but I might send you that. But again, I don't really care about football, but I've heard about the shellacking of the 70 to whatever.
So this incident, this match, this is what ended the great Antonio's wrestling career. His attitude and unwillingness to work with people just wasn't worth the potential draw he could be. And also the writing was on the wall too. I mean, he was old and out of shape and still strong as hell. But yeah, he kind of looked like he was one of those guys that he'd probably sweat when he ate if he was like
I know
very vigorously eating. Yeah.
Yep.
Inoki would later in life be elected to Japan's House of Councilors in 1989 and met with foreign dignitaries like Saddam Hussein and Fidel Castro. Then in 1990, he converted to Islam and changed his name to Muhammad Hussein Inoki. There's a follow-up on him. Back to the great Antonio. When it was all said and done, during Antonio's wrestling career, he wrestled in nearly 200 matches.
That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that is pretty impressive. And while his wrestling career was over, his career as an oddball local celebrity was not. He continued to do strongman exhibitions on local variety shows and talk shows and doing his whole singing act. And then, in 1980s, he even got some acting in. 1982, the French-Canadian prehistoric adventure movie, The Quest for Fire, had our boy Antonio in it. He plays a massive caveman from the Kazam tribe. He also gets killed in it. He's only in it for a brief moment. Remember that movie, Quest for Fire?
No, I don't think anybody does.
There's like one scene in it, if I recall, that's spoofed a lot, but I'm not positive on it. Yeah, it's basically about cavemen. One tribe has the power of fire, and then another one steals it, so they gotta go back and get it back. And yeah, I think it's kind of famous too because it's all done like grunts and moans and caveman speak. No actual dialogue, really.
I like that Phineas and Ferb episode.
Sure.
There was an episode of Phineas and Ferb where they did a caveman, and they literally did the entire thing in caveman speak. So yeah, and they explained it away. It was actually it may have been because they explained it away. They actually interjected like a little, the creators talking about how they're like whatever. It's great. Phineas and Ferb's awesome. You should watch it. What is it? Quest for Fire.
The Quest for Fire. Yes.
Holy cat! Ron Perlman's in it.
That makes sense because he's kind of caveman looking.
Yep. Quest for Fire. I have never heard of this.
Oh wow, Ray Don Chong's in it too. That's Tommy Chong's daughter.
Okay. Yeah, she was wasn't she the female? Yep, she was a commando. That's the first thing I like. Hey, she's commando.
Yep, she was in.
Okay, we're done. We're done with IMDb. Let's
go. Commando was a movie.
Speaking of Strongman.
Yes, indeed.
He lied. Anyway.
In 1983, the great Antonio appeared in the movie called A 20th Century Chocolate Cake, which is an independent comedy movie where he's seen doing what he loves, pulling a station wagon. He's in it just for a brief moment. Then also, later on, and we've Hop forward to the 90s real quick for his last movie appearance, where in 1996 he appeared in the low-budget action horror movie The Abominable Snowman, where he played a snowman. Unsure how long he was in this movie because I couldn't really find a clip on it. It's like super low budget. I mean, it's barely got an IMDb on it, kind of low budget movie.
Oh, wow.
Okay, we're going to hop back to the 80s. 1985, and the great Antonio approaches boxing promoter Don King and asks him for $1 million to finance an action film that he wants to make. Don King declines, but hey, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
I mean, once again, like, you know what? Good on you. You gave it a shot. I salute you, sir.
Honestly, yeah, kind of makes me realize maybe I should just ask rich people for money sometimes and just see what they do.
Right. I mean, honestly, that's definitely. I mean, there's a, going back when I was at GameStop days, we were one of those conference. We were doing a little conference. They'd break it out, and me and some other bunch of other store managers in this room, and the rep was up there with a bunch of stuff on the table. And he's like, yeah, the guy's like, talk about questions and blah, blah, blah. And one manager just raises his hands, goes, can I have that? He's like, yes, you may. And he gives it to him. I'm like, what the fuck, man? He got this like really expensive, like $300 statue, like a little anime statue. I'm like, oh, man.
You're like, all I had to do was ask?
I didn't even realize that was an option. So, yeah, I mean, again, it sounds ridiculous.
That dude probably asks for everything and gets so much that he asks for, surprisingly, because people are just like, "Oh, you want it? Well, go ahead and have it. I don't want it."
Hey, what's the word? Say, no. There you go. It's
during the 80s. He also managed to grow his hair into 2 real long dreadlocks that he started using for his feats of strength. Those are the clubs you were talking about hanging on his side. That's actually his hair. He would use these dreadlocks and he would challenge people to tug of war with him. He'd be like, "Hey, grab these dreads and see if you can pull harder than me." He would go on shows too, and he's got 2 dreads, one on each side, and he'd have them pulled straight out and have guys on each side trying to pull him around.
I guess it is hair. I was thinking, I was like, what kind of stick is that would wrap around the best back? Yeah, it's hair.
Yep. Huh. Yep. He's going for a full Twilight look kind of thing or something. I don't know. And also, at one point, he would even get metal rings braided into these dreadlocks too, so he could just quick hook stuff up to those rings and pull it. And as you can see, these dreads were impressively long, nearly touching the ground. He also decided to take them, and he covered up the entire ends of them in duct tape or electrical tape. And that way they became club-like, and he would use these clubbed ends to play golf with.
Oh, you know what? I was thinking
he would go out to golf courses and challenge people to rounds of golf, just hitting a golf ball with his hair.
Yep. I mean, it's like fucking Air Bud thing. Like, there's no rule that says you can't, so...
Yep. He would also let little kids grab onto his dreads, and he would just pull them along like he was a horse and the kids were plows. Just like, hey, kids, grab onto this, and just have like a dozen kids just like daisy chained behind him, just like, floop. Even in his 60s and 70s, this dude was still showing off his strength every chance he could to anybody who would watch.
To the horror of their mothers.
Yeah. Travis, get away from that strange man. You don't know where he's been. He'd also become very large by this size at this point. He now bragged that he wore a size 90 suit and size 28 shoes. Should be noted the shoes do look kind of big on him, and so does the suit.
I mean, yeah, he looks impressive, but then again, it's like it's kind of hard to tell. There's no context.
Yeah, there's like, it's not like he's standing next to a bunch of people in a lot of these pictures.
Yeah, I mean, I'm seeing pictures of him. I see a picture where he was younger with he's standing in front of that VW bus. He doesn't look that big.
Yeah, but, well, he's 6'4".
Yeah, I
mean,
which is impressive. He's taller than I am. I mean, he's taller than me by like he's 6'4".
And also, I don't know. Yeah, back in like the 50s and 60s when he was making his name, 6'4" is probably a little bit taller than it is nowadays. I feel like the average person is a lot taller than they used to be.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of those things. It's like, not only taller, but then you look at, high school yearbooks from back then. Like, even kids were like 15, like, they look like they're in their 30s. It's like, you look at the yearbooks now, it's like, well, they look like they're 15.
1994, the magazine The Montreal Mirror gave the great Antonio the title of the best great Montrealer. That's a nice award to win, I guess. So, sometimes in the 80s or 90s, I couldn't figure out when, his wife apparently left him. And after that happened, he kind of started to go on a downhill slide, going into disheveled poverty. He began living in a tiny little one-bedroom apartment by himself and made side income by selling photo montages that he made himself for $5 to $8 a pop. Apparently, over the decades, he held on to nearly every article that he could ever find in a newspaper for him.
Mhm.
And he would take these and cut them up into little, like, almost like ransom note looking photo montages and then make photocopies of them. And he would just carry around this giant bag just full of those. And if you ever came over like, hey, great Antonio, he would immediately try to sell you one. Like, you want to buy this? And if you bought one, oftentimes he would like literally just reach right in that bag, grab out another and try to sell you another one right away. Sometimes often the same exact one he just tried to sell you.
Well,
You can actually find a lot of stories about him doing this on Reddit and places like that in wrestling forums, because this guy made it all the way up until 2000. So you actually get to see some like internet interactions with him and such, which is kind of neat. If you look at the photos too, you can actually see one of these little photo montages that he did.
yeah, I was just looking at him.
Yep. All the words cut out and everything. And yeah, honestly, they're kind of neat in a way.
They are kind of neat. I mean, there's really no like rhyme or reason. I mean,
Apparently also he was like borderline illiterate. Like, even if you asked him to sign stuff, he did it in big block letters, which they say he was borderline illiterate, but I don't know. He's putting together these photo montages fairly well.
Well, but you figure, I mean, with these, it's just like he doesn't need to read them. He just needs,
Yeah, true.
you know,
Recognize words.
yeah, like it's recognizing shapes.
Yeah.
That's like a lot of times when you see some like lower quality, and there's not necessarily lower quality, but like animation on a budget, they'll send out their stuff to Korea, and then, they'll have Koreans do like the betweens. And a lot of times, if you see them writing like English words on signs and stuff, sometimes it doesn't look quite right. It's definitely an English word, but it's clearly drawn by someone who has no fucking clue what it meant.
I've also noticed too, sometimes they'll flip books the wrong way because they read the opposite direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you ever noticed that before.
Every so often, yeah.
Yeah, it's not like a super common thing, but every once in a while, like, I remember in DuckTales at one point, Scrooge McDuck was flipping a book backwards while reading it. And it's like,
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, then I learned later on, it's like, oh yeah, sometimes in Korean animation, they don't, put two and two together and whatever.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, it's basically the ditch digging of art. It's just like,
it's where The Simpsons is made, isn't it? Korea?
Yep.
Yep.
And every so often they'll reference like, oh, the horrible conditions of the people that work at Simpsons, but they
don't do anything to fix it.
Yeah, they haven't done anything about it. So.
Right? Yep. Late 1990s, and Tiger Woods has burst onto the golfing scene, and the great Antonio is right there to challenge him to a golfing match. Antonio gets to use his hair, and Tiger gets to use his clubs. Winner gets $100 million. Tiger does not respond to this challenge, presumably because Antonio does not have access to $100 million. But hey, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take.
Man, this guy, you know what? I have bad respect for him.
Honestly, it's kind of a confidence builder. It's like, hey, man, just shoot your shots. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no.
I mean, that's one thing about me is like I keep on putting these restrictions. Like, oh, I'm not going to do that. I don't have X, Y, and Z. But this guy's like, fuck it, man.
Yep. And then all of a sudden you start realizing that's never stopped people before not having X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Around this time in the late 90s, we also get the last appearance of Antonio on television. He's part of a local Montreal prank show. Unsuspecting people go into a telephone booth, and as soon as they use it, a mountain of a man with his back to them comes and blocks them from leaving the phone booth. At first, people are annoyed at the dude blocking the booth, until he turns around and shows himself to be the great Antonio, and suddenly the prankies are all smiles and laughs because, hey, who doesn't love Antonio? You can actually see clips of this too, and it is kind of cute. He'll like sit with his back, people will be like, what are you doing, dude? And all of a sudden somebody will be like, it's the great Antonio. And he'll turn around and be like, oh, look, it is you. Aw. Cute little scenes.
I guess, if they know who he is.
Yeah, he seemed pretty... Yeah, I mean, he was on local variety shows a lot and on the news and everything else, so...
When was this?
When?
Yeah, when?
Late 90s.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I mean, he has been in Montreal since the 50s, so...
Yeah, and again, I'm coming from my stupid American head where it's like, well, I've never heard of him, so no one else knows of him.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm sure there's some local Louisville celebrities or something that you could talk about, and people are like, oh, I remember him. Everybody knew who he was.
I not really, because I don't really pay attention to local celebrities. But I still will to this day will remember that fucking with Seattle. I mean, I heard he's dead now, but the insurance guy Fonk.
Oh yeah, Vern Fonk. Yep,
Vern Fonk. I will always remember him.
His name was Robert Thalicki III. I met him once.
Oh yeah.
Yep. Got an insurance quote from somebody in his office. Nice guy though.
Oh, I mean, okay, I'm not gonna say he seemed like it because everyone has their
yeah, right. I mean, you never know. He could have had a basement full of dead puppies.
Right, I was just about to say something like that. You're like, yeah. I'm sure when in private, he's like, I love the the tears of children, the taste of their blood.
The
So,
crunching of bone and sinew.
oh yeah.
Also, around this time, he gave an interview about his strength exploits over his life. And he told the interviewer that recently he went to donate blood and they couldn't accept his blood. Why? Because the doctor said that his blood was not of this world. They said his blood was too strong to be from this world and that he obviously had the blood of an extraterrestrial.
Okay, Charlie Sheen, back off.
Yeah. Right. I mean, maybe he went to donate blood and they were just like, you've got herpes or something, we can't do it. And he just was like, I don't understand those words. I don't know what this hepatitis is. So he just came up with something.
He's
hepatitis,
like Mr. Birds.
That sounds alien.
Mr. Birds. Yeah, like you have all the diseases. So
yeah, whether or not Antonio actually believed he had extraterrestrial blood or if he was just being a showman, we don't know. Because this dude was a hype machine for himself.
yeah, who else would do it?
Yeah, right. We are now in the early 2000s, and the great Antonio now basically just visits the local donut shop, grocery store, and sits out, on the benches outside of that and the local bus station, hoping for a fan to come by and buy one of his photo montages, or even just hang out and talk to him, because he is old and lonely at this point. Again, you can actually find a lot of people on Reddit and wrestling forums talking about how they'd encounter him at this day, and you'd walk up and be like, hey, it's great Antonio, and he'd get really excited and like run up and give you a big old hug, and maybe even like pick you up and toss you around if you felt like it. Which, it's nice that he's friendly and all that, but as people will very obviously point out when they met him around this period, his hygiene wasn't very good at this point, to the point where
That's the first thing I thought of.
Shower.
Like,
yeah. And apparently he was one of those, like, when he came up to you, you could taste him before you could smell him almost kind of deal. And this was kind of unfortunate because he was lonely and people started avoiding him because he smelled so bad. So that just kind of spiraled the loneliest more, probably led to him be more depressed and not shower.
That's easily fixable. Like, I feel bad for him, but I mean, he wasn't homeless, correct?
Nope. He lived in a tiny little 1-bedroom apartment.
Yeah, that theoretically had a shower, and I mean, I know he's not making a ton of money, but soap's cheap, so.
But also, I mean, once you just kind of get into that weird depressed funk, you probably don't even think about showering anymore.
Fair,
or cleaning. I mean,
and plus, he had those giant dreadlocks,
Yeah, and those probably kind of had tendency to stink, I would think.
Yeah, I mean, so I get it, but I will say this, of whatever he was doing, he never got a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
He lived on his own terms.
Oh, remember back in our John Waters story, how if you wanted to get a message to Waters, you sent it to a bookstore?
Yeah.
That's kind of how you did Great Antonio if you wanted to get a hold of him. You went to a Dunkin' Donuts and you left a message there, and in the next couple of days, he'd probably show up and get it, because he pretty much would just like show up to that store and just be like, hi, everybody, every day or every other day, and then go about his merry little way on his route. September 7th, 2003, Antonio shuffles down to the Dunkin' Donuts and gets his coffee and acquires his messages. He then goes to the grocery store he frequents, purchases a lottery ticket, and sits at his favorite bench where he hopes to sell some more memorabilia to the locals. He looks at his lotto ticket and thinks to himself, is this the day the great Antonio strikes it big? It is not. He passes away on that bench right then and there from a heart attack, peacefully at the age of 77. Store employees came out, found him dead there, called the paramedics to come get him. Took 9 people to move his body. He died single with no children or any next of kin.
Like how we assume he died peacefully. It's like he died screaming in terror.
Well, he was in front of a store in public, so I would assume.
Yeah, I guess.
Because
or it's like
that people just wanted to cover it up.
All his muscles locked up. He couldn't scream. He like tried to scream for somebody, please, dear God, come find me, and no one. Like people passing by. He's like, ah.
Being as he had no money and no relations, there was no money for a proper burial for him. However, once word got out, charities came out, raised up a bunch of money, and the locals were able to get up enough money to give him a proper burial. Mike Boone, a Montreal reporter, wrote that Montrealers flocked to the visitation at his funeral. And he said, in addition to television crews, there were goth girls, muscle boys, and sentimental seniors here in attendance. Sounds like he had an interesting little collection of people show up.
Yeah.
After his death, discovered among his belongings was clippings from various celebrities, including letters from the office of Bill Clinton, old photos of the great Antonio, along with people like Pierre Trudeau, Liza Minnelli, Lee Majors, Sophia Loren, and Johnny Carson. As I said before, he was on the Johnny Carson show a few times.
A few
In
times?
2000,
A few times?
Johnny Carson? Yeah, I believe so. I think he was in there in the 70s and the 80s a couple of times.
I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I don't know why I was like, I was shocked as I was. Because, I mean, that's the thing. Like, you think Johnny Carson, like, oh, yeah, the height or whatever. Like, that motherfucker had, 100, 200 shows per year. I, yeah, they're not all like, the most, he had to have. I'm not necessarily saying this guy's a nobody, but come on,
You just really want to cut down the Great Antonio just because you haven't heard of him.
Not trying to cut down the Great
You're like,
Antonio.
hey man, I know all of Montreal loves him and Japan loves him and Canada loves him, but damn it, I haven't heard of this man. So obviously there's something wrong with these countries.
So fuck that guy, and everybody knew him.
This Great Antonio can get on a bus with Vitas and just fuck off to rural China somewhere.
Purely because I have not heard of him.
Yeah. In 2004, sculptor Armand Vianacourt donated a statue in the memory of the Great Antonio to the city of Montreal, suggesting that it be erected in Bobine Park in Rosemont, where the Great Antonio lived for many years. The city of Montreal said, thanks, but no, we don't want the statue of what we consider a vagrant in our parks. Yeah. The populace loved him, but I guess the higher-ups in the city were just kind of like, he was just kind of more of a vagrant in our minds. Or maybe the actual statue just sucked. I mean, it could be that too. It could have just been horribly ugly, and they're like,
Or it's made of meat and chocolate. They're like, no.
2008, the Quebecian group Mais Alou recorded a song in homage to the Great Antonio on their album La Ligne Orange, as well as they put on a recording of the Great Antonio singing at the very end as a bonus track. And yeah, you can actually find that album, and he sings pretty good. He really does. In 2014, Alice Gravel wrote and illustrated a children's book about the Great Antonio. It's standard kids book. It's kind of cute. Shows him like, pulling buses with his hair and, bending steel poles with his hands and carrying logs. And I do not believe they left in the area where he got almost kicked to death by a pro wrestler. In 2015, a plaque and bench were dedicated to him in the borough of Montreal, where he had lived for the last 20 years. And that bench is now dedicated to the Great Antonio and is known as the Antonio Bench. Yay. Also that year, the American Folk Art Museum presented the Great Antonio's works, his little photo montages in their museum, and those were the first institutional presentations of Antonio's works. So, the Great Antonio's works are actually in a folk art museum somewhere. Oh, yeah. Also, his personal papers are also in the McCord Stewart Museum. He's in 2 museums. I should have read further down the list before I started talking on that one. Ha-ha! And we're pretty much at the end of it. But right now, I would like to leave you with some final words regarding our subject tonight. These words came from Antonio's landlords in an interview she gave columnist Josh Freed. And these are the kind words that we could all be hoped to remember by later in life. The landlord said, Antonio was a nice boy, but so big. Every time he sits on the toilet, bang, toilet breaks. My son fixes and fixes, but always the same. Boom, toilet breaks again. There you go. Final words to remember the Great Antonio from.
What do you have to say about this really famous tenant you have? He broke my toilet a lot.
He broke my toilet. I've always sent my kid up there to fix it, but boom, toilet just breaks again.
Meanwhile, in the afterlife, he's like, no mentions of all the times I helped you out. All those times,
right.
Your son's car broke down once, and I pushed out.
Right. I pulled your son to work in his car weeks on end.
I remember the upstairs neighbors got a new piano. I carried it up there for you. Not a word about that. Just I broke.
Just the fact that I broke the toilet.
Like, you guys are dicks.
So that's all for today's episode. Nate, what did you learn today?
I learned about this great strongman who apparently broke his toilet a lot.
He broke his toilet a lot. The bane of landlords ever: large people breaking toilets. I think eventually they would have gotten like a heavy duty toilet to save themselves time and money, because they do have toilets for big and tall people kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad I heard about this guy. It's just, it is.
You just hate the fact you're just now learning about him.
Well,
so much of your life is missing now.
It's also kind of a shame. Like, I mean, I guess he wasn't that big, but onto the Giant, Giant had a same kind of, he went to wrestling more than just strongman.
Yeah,
but I don't know. It seems like, you know what? He lived his full life.
Yep.
He didn't. He never got stuck in an office. He was never greeting people that came in and or upselling someone to buy some fucking magazine. I mean, he was, he lived his life.
Yep. Eastern European farm boy who just happened to be extremely strong and liked to tell tall stories.
Yeah, I mean, you know what? We're still talking about him.
We are still talking about him.
That's more than can be said. The majority of the people living, in the past and now, there's still, he might not be super famous, but here we are, still talking about him.
Yeah, best part too, when doing the research and writing the script, I realized that this is the most comprehensive thing done on the guy. Almost everything that I've read about him either concentrates just on like the strongman part or just the wrestling part or just like what happened at the end of his life. None of them really bring it all together. So that's kind of neat on this.
Right. So if you listen to this, you would know more about this guy than most other.
Yep. Probably even more than the great Antonio knew about himself towards the end of his life.
Right.
All right. So there we go. That's the end of this Oft Off Topic. Next episode is going to be, we're going to finish the Ahsoka series, which I still need to watch those episodes. This is where the ending jingle goes. This is where the ending jingle goes. I don't know if we need one. I don't know if we'll get one. But if we do, then here is where it goes.